What's up, family? We need to talk about something that's been all over the news the last few days. And I want to break it down from my perspective because the media is not telling you the full story. They're running headlines about peak Hegseth being under siege, about the top generals going for the kill shot, about the military being in crisis because the Secretary of Defense is supposedly wrecking the Pentagon. And if you just read the headlines, if you just caught the news alerts, if you just listen to the talking heads who's been running that building for the last 30 years, you'll think things were falling apart. But here's the thing about coordinated media attacks: when everybody starts singing the same song at the same time, you got to ask, who's conducting the choir? And the answer is pretty clear when you actually look at what's going on, right? These aren't whistleblowers trying to protect national security. These are bureaucrats who got comfortable, got complacent, got promoted for being political instead of being effective. And now they're mad because somebody finally showed up to hold them accountable. So let's break this down, look at what actually happened, looked at who's leaking and why, and then I'll give you my thoughts on where this is really headed. So let's start with the basics. Pete Hegseth has fired or forced out more than 20 top generals and admirals since he took over at the Pentagon. That's a fact that multiple outlets have reported. But the media wants you to hear that number and panic, and they want you to think that this is some kind of purge, some kind of reckless rampage by a man who doesn't know what he's doing. But nobody in the media is asking the question that actually matters: were those generals doing a good job? Because if the answer is no, if they were failing at their jobs, then firing them isn't a scandal. It's accountability. It's the job. Think about it from an everyday perspective. If you own a business and you hire a new manager, and that manager walks in and sees a bunch of employees who've been underperforming for years, what do you expect them to do? You expect them to make changes. You expect them to put the right people in the right seats. You don't expect them to keep paying people who are failing just because those people have been there a long time. That would be crazy. But somehow, when it comes to the Pentagon, the rules are supposed to be different. Somehow, the most powerful military in the world is supposed to be run by the same people who've been running it into the ground for the last 2 decades. And the moment somebody tries to change that, the media loses their collective minds. All right. So, as you see this article from Class Report, it says Pentagon Policy Chief Elbridge Colby has spent months trying to secure an official visit to Beijing, but China has so far declined to invite him. The apparent reason is Beijing's anger over the Trump administration's $11 billion arms sale to Taiwan, along with broader U.S. China tensions. Colby, a longtime China hawk, sees the trip, particularly a speech at China's National Defense University, as an opportunity to stabilize military ties and explain U.S. defense policy. However, Chinese officials remain reluctant, citing both Taiwan related tensions and Kobe's history of hardline views on China. And then you have this right here: Trump Hegseth clashed at Camp David over Iran missile depletion concerns. At a Camp David summit this weekend, President Trump demanded answers from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over extreme munition shortages. All right, here you go. Another one. U.S. has used virtually all of its long-range precision missiles during Iran war. Reuters. Nearly 80% of interceptors for a key missile defense system depleted, sources say, CNN. So let's talk about who these generals actually are. We got General Randy George, was the Army Chief of Staff. He served 7 presidents, 7. The media acts like that's a badge of honor. But I look at that number and I see something different. I see a man who managed to survive 7 administrations without being held accountable for anything. He presided over the Afghanistan withdrawal. You already know how the Afghanistan withdrawal went, where we left billions of dollars in equipment to the Taliban and American citizens behind. He presided over a military that couldn't meet its recruiting goals. And now we have the strongest numbers of recruitment ever in American history in the United States military. Thank God for that. He presided over a culture that prioritized diversity quotas over combat readiness. And when Hegseth finally said enough is enough and asked him to step down, the media acted like it was some kind of tragedy. But the results speak for itself, because when Pete Hegseth did that, obviously the numbers of recruitment increased tremendously. So a tragedy. Hmm. A tragedy is watching your military get weaker every single year while the people in charge collect their pensions and write their memoirs. What Hegseth did wasn't a tragedy. It was the first honest thing that's happened at the Pentagon in a generation. And then there's General Chris Donahue. The media loves talking about him like he's some kind of hero. And look, I'm not going to sit here and disrespect a man's service. Thank you to all my servicemen and servicewomen who have the courage, the sacrifice that they take to defend and protect this country and all that they do, being away from their families, et cetera, putting their life on the line. Thank you for your service. Truly. But that's not what we do on this channel, right? We do not disrespect our servicemen and servicewomen. We stand with them. But being a legend on the battlefield doesn't mean you're the right person to lead a military that's facing the challenges of 2026. The world has changed. The way wars are fought has changed. And if you can't adapt, you got to make room for somebody who can. That's not personal, that's professional. What they say, you either catch up with the times or you get left behind. And that's how every successful organization in the world operates, even in corporate America. But the military industrial complex doesn't operate like a successful organization. It operates like a government bureaucracy. And government bureaucracies don't fire people. They shuffle them around and they promote them sideways and they kick the can down the road until somebody else has to deal with the mess. And Pete Hegseth was not sent to the Pentagon to kick cans. He was sent there to empty the trash. Now, let's talk about these leaks specifically, right? Because this is where the media really shows you their hand. NBC News ran a story citing for sources saying Trump is isolated and humiliated, right? Reuters, as you've seen, ran a story citing 3 sources saying we exhausted our precision strike missiles. CNN here on the screen cited multiple senior officials saying the president is panicking. CBS had 2 people with direct knowledge talking about depleted stockpiles. And The Atlantic, which we're going to get to in a minute in that article, ran a piece about how the U.S. squandered its strategic advantage. All of these stories dropped at the same time. All of them used anonymous sources. All of them said the same thing from slightly different angles. That's not journalism, that's a campaign. That's a coordinated effort by the people inside the Pentagon to create a crisis of confidence in their own leadership. And the media, which has been dying for a story that makes this administration look bad, was happy to deliver the system, as you can see. What in the world, how most anti-treasonous, or how can you not say this is a treasonous act to go against your country and want to make your country feel weak after all the perks and blessings that you get from the beauty of the United States of America with the freedom and liberties to be able to say these things? Shows you how disrespectful and ungrateful individuals are, let alone big corporations, in this case the liberal media or the mainstream media, to basically benefit from the perks on being on the beautiful land of the United States of America, but spit in the United States of America face at the same time. Now, of course, you have your opinions. I may not agree, but in the name of journalism, aren't you guys journalism upholding institutions? Doesn't seem much. And now this is why I do the work, to debunk this, but to give you guys the truth so we can have a productive conversation in the name of truthful journalism. No narrative, no agenda, just receipts. So this gives me to the next thing, right? Exclusive US has used virtually all of its long-range precision missiles during Iran war, sources say. This is US news by Reuters. CNN, Trump grows angry over reports on depleted munitions, believing it weakens him in Iran negotiations. Then we have this. CNN on sources. Trump was fully aware of any potential issues related to the ammunition for months, and the reports were not a surprise to him. CNBC. Trump privately complained in recent days that revealing the decline in U.S. ammunition stockpiles makes Washington look weak. Right? The Atlantic, which I was talking about here. How the U.S. squandered its strategic advantage. Idle threats and munitions shortages have boxed Trump in. The United States is running out of missiles. After 5 months of war with Iran, stockpiles of long-range weapons are so low, current and former U.S. defense officials told us that they don't believe the US has enough to combat a threat in Asia. The remaining supplies, depending on the munition, are as low as 20% of what the Pentagon would like to have in hand. And stores of sophisticated interceptor missiles such as Patriots and terminal high altitude aero defense missiles are too depleted to give or sell the weapons to Ukraine or effectively defend against Iran's launch of ballistic missiles. Even when troops see Iranian missiles approaching, they are forced to decide in a matter of seconds rather to expend a limited number of interceptors or hope for the best, the defense officials told us. And this is the Atlantic article that I'm referring to and just mentioned, right? And we go on. And this is our president. The U.S. has massive amounts of munitions, especially of certain types. Additionally, large amounts are being manufactured and shipped to the U.S. as needed. Defense companies are building the largest number of plants and factories in our country's history. The leakers, quote unquote, of these treasonous, and I agree, statements are being hunted down. Long-term jail sentences will be sought. President Donald J. Trump explains why they're anonymous, right? The simple fact is what Trump is doing is bringing back our manufacturing, um, us to be the main manufacturer source, to be the main source when it comes to creating our supplies. The problem is when it goes back to the Clintons that I keep reiterating in a multitude of videos, when they sold off our manufacturing in our factories and we had to depend on China and other countries to basically for products, right, to be imported and exported, we basically weakened ourselves to depend on other countries to rely us with the munitions that we need or supplies. So now everything back then used to be USA made, but in a short for a short chunk of change, we're going back to Bill Clinton and the Clintons. They sold off America, and it seemed as though things were booming just for some quick cash. In exchange, we really cheapened the things in our country and devalued ourselves as a country when we were actually making products better than other countries that actually stood strong and American strong, like our cars and everything like that, that we have outsources all the way down to our ammunition, right? Our munitions. And then you wonder why our president is bringing it back. Because it's okay to rely on others for extra, but we should rely on our own selves to be self-sustainable as a country the way China and other countries are, right? Because you cannot rely on being a sovereign country if you're constantly relying on others to prop you up as a country, because then who's to say that that will actually keep you strengthened as a country when they can use that to weaken you in a form of weaponization. So it's best to be self-sustainable on your own and have American products, right? To sustain yourself, which is the reason why our auto manufacturing is coming back. And all of these factory jobs in factories that Trump is mentioning, right? And plants. So we can continue to be strong and self-sustainable and continue to thrive, right? Where we rely on our own industries and continue to be innovative with it, to evolve and be out with the times and continue to thrive. That's not hard. That's basically like saying, okay, well, I am going to rely on, I'm going to rely on basically getting my nutrition from other countries, but you don't know what's in it. Instead of growing your own things to create your own proper nutrition where you actually know where the source is coming from. Same thing as a country, right? You can remove a heartbeat of a nation if you're being outsourced to the simple fact of everything being imported and exported, where other countries have their way with you and basically charging you an arm and a leg when you can make it yourself as a country. And at the end of the day, coincidentally, these other countries actually need us for our military protection when it comes to how innovative we are. So why we can't be innovative and being a heartbeat and being strong and self-reliant in our own country, right? So this is our Trump. Our I say our Trump. Well, our Trump, it is our Trump, our president, and showing the strength and triumph and courage and a strong country in which our president portrays as a strong leader, basically making sure, because also you don't want to be weak to your enemies, because once they see a a leak or opportunity to weakness, that's a way to take advantage. You are never to show you're weak. And the thing is, the beauty of our president, because I believe that we should have every president should have a business requirement, have operated a business, have some type of business expertise, right? When it comes to having a successful business. I believe that should be a requirement where you should know how to run a business, have a successful business, because the same way you run a business is how you run the country. So our president, when the name of triumph in trumping the others and these leakers, as our Trump, our president of the United States of America, he is great at the art of the deal. He never lets our enemies know what we're up to. Keeps them guessing, keeps them on their toes. Iron sharpens iron. But if you have leakers like this who want to portray us as weak, then of course other individuals will feel infuriated, and which is why you see these terrorists, these knuckleheads who chants death to America, seem more infuriated, putting the battery in their back to continue to add fuel to the fire in the name of our treasonous media to continue to fight with us. And then the media wants to make us like we're weak. If you believe our country is so weak, just because you're against the president who is our president, even they can't even respect the position of presidency, even if you disagree with the president. But you should respect it because us, the American people, have spoken, and the vote speaks for themselves through the process of democracy, right? So now you're attacking it in the name of media, but the media says in the name of being a mainstream liberal media that they want to uphold democracy and the powers to the people. But is it really if you still constantly discredit it and attack our president, let alone making our country weak in the name of hatred and disapproval and dislike for our president, even for the simple fact of out of respect for the position of presidency, which is the most powerful position in the law of the land, tells you how treasonous it is. Tells you if we're so weak, then why be here? Right? If we're so weak, then what makes you feel why are your businesses so successful in propping up this propaganda and ignorance? Because you're definitely benefiting from this country. Try that elsewhere is my challenge to these mainstream media outlets, right? So I say all that to say that we should listen to our president, and that's why we had the most transparent administration in history when it comes to our president. And when he says it, we know it, and that's why he does what he does, and being the most communicative in the most advanced way through the internet, through his press conferences. So we hear from the bird's mouth. None of that typical politician stuff. Say one thing, do another. Oh, get up there and let the spokesperson speak. We hear from our president. Our president is engaged. We have that connection with our president where he's actually seeing everything on the ground within us, we the people, and letting us know directly. You can't question it as much if you hear from the bird's mouth. And who is them to say that our president don't know how to lead? They're not in these operation rooms, right? They're not in these decision rooms, right? So I'm saying they didn't ask the hard question. They didn't demand name sources, right? They just want the administration to look bad and was happy to deliver the system. They didn't ask whether the people making these claims were the same people who created the problems in the first place. They just ran the stories because the stories fit the narrative. And here's what those stories conveniently leave out. The people who are leaking this information are the same people who were in charge when our stockpiles got depleted. They're the same people who approved the war plans. They're the same people who told the president we have enough munition, I can't even get the words. You got me all passionate and stuff. Munitions to do what needed to be done. And now that the bill has come due, now that the stockpiles are lower than they're blaming everyone except themselves. That's not whistleblowing, that's covering your own tracks by throwing someone else under the bus. It's the oldest trick in the Washington playbook. And when you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, blame the new guy for the crumbs on the floor. And the media prints it as gospel because they want the new guy to fail. Or I should say, more experience because our president definitely has learned from his first term. Most definitely. So we have a president that's always learning, always growing, always evolving. And boy, at his age, works. Like the energy is up there. Thank goodness. And keeping them strong and keeping them healthy. But boy, our president works like never seen before. And then we have this. A big Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan are set to sign a joint defense agreement in Saudi Arabia today. Right? The three countries have been deepening security, and diplomatic. Then we go to this in regards of Jesse Waters. I want you guys to hear this about the Strait of Hormuz.
Fox News alert, we're closing in on a deal. Mideast negotiators have reportedly agreed to open up the strait with no tolls on one condition. State media says no U.S. or Israeli ships can sail through. So that's not happening. POTUS says this is all going to be over pretty soon, and even the gay Ayatollah is begging Gulf neighbors, please tell Trump to stop the airstrikes and lift the blockade. The president wrestling with leaks back home. The media reporting we're running out of missiles. The White House says bogus.
We have certain types of munitions that are very powerful, that we have virtual unlimited supply. We have others where it's a little bit tighter, and we're getting them in on a daily basis. We have literally massive amounts of ammunition.
Trump says the leakers will be hunted down and jailed. We have stockpiles all over the world that we haven't even tapped. These leaks are mostly designed to pressure Congress into sending the Pentagon more money, which they deserve, but that's not the way to do it. Marines on the box are keeping the wall of steel sturdy. 49 vessels have been turned around. Meanwhile, we have troops training in the Mojave. They're testing out high-tech gear that could change warfare forever. Robots working with soldiers on foot, recon drones, and new battlefield sensors. And our Air Force is developing AI-controlled F-16s. They're flying over Florida. The pilot's still in the cockpit for now, just to make sure everything goes smooth. And in the Far East, Taiwan's wargaming, turning themselves into a porcupine if China gets frisky. The U.S. military and our allies are ready for anything, anywhere, anytime.
Wow. And the simple fact is, he said AI, like the pilot is just on standby to make sure everything go right. That is something else. The beauty of how we evolve, um, is mind blowing, man. Who would think that now we have like jets and stuff like flying by their own? And of course, Taiwan is our ally, right? They're our ally. Um, and they use our security defense to protect themselves, as I had mentioned before, when it comes to the U.S. protecting them, from China. And you let the mainstream liberal media tell it, oh, Iran controls the strait. The United States doesn't control this strait. America doesn't, but we obliterated their whole army. They don't have nothing. They just, not to mention that our president mentioned that we won't need the strait any longer. It will no longer exist. It'll be a body of water soon because they'll just move under ground with pipes in regards of the oil and things like that. But individuals will say, oh, well, they'll just blow it up. Well, good luck with that. That's all I'm going to say with that. But my point is, I don't understand how they think they're going to control any body of water when we're the ones sitting there watching everything come in and out as it flows, right? And nobody can go through it unless we approve. So, and I want you to see the clip in its entirety of our president addressing uh, the munitions situation in its entirety. Jesse Waters played clips of it, but I want you guys to see the full context.
Come up and maybe don't come up. Hopefully nothing else does come up. But we're in very good shape. We have literally come up and maybe don't come up. Hopefully nothing else does come up. But we're in very good shape. We have literally massive amounts of ammunition. Yeah.
Mr. President, on Ukraine, President Zelensky says his country desperately needs long-range missiles or those Patriot missile batteries. Is that something that you're...
Well, I mean, we want missiles too. When Biden gave him so much, Biden gave $300 billion worth of ammunition. When I left, it was full, and he gave a lot of it away. Now we're...
Then you wonder why I mentioned kicking a can down the road. And when Trump comes in, he's only been in office for a year, some months. But you see how a previous administration They can kick the can and problems down the road so far that when you get your hand caught in a cookie jar, you blame the new person, and because you're no longer in office. In this case, the Biden administration. So it's a lot of problems from yesteryears that he's trying to fix, on top of strengthening our economy, our country, and making us USA strong. And self-relying on ourselves and bringing jobs back to America and not outsourcing them like the auto manufacturing business and our when it comes to our ammunition and militia and things like that.
We're rebuilding it, and we're using munitions that are very powerful, very good, but we wouldn't have been using them. We could have used something else. But these are a little bit older type, equally as effective, and it's things that we have so much. Plus, we have supplies of munitions all over the world that if we ever needed them, we'd take that. We're supplied all over the world, but we're in very, very good shape.
Russia seems to have increased their attacks on
I
civilian
know,
areas.
I know.
That must be of concern to you, Mr. President.
Well, look, we're not involved from the standpoint we're separated by an ocean, but I hate to see 25,000 young people a month get killed, and that's what's happening. Between Russia and Ukraine, they're losing on average 25,000, mostly soldiers, a month. And, we're working on it, and I think we're making progress, but it's a violent, very violent war. There's a lot of hatred in that war, a lot of hatred between the two leaders. I settled 8 wars. I thought this would be maybe one of the easier ones, and it turned out to be the most difficult. But progress is being made. Thank you very much.
So there you have it, right? And then the woman who asked about the munitions, right? I want you guys to see in its entirety as well, even though you see most of it speaking to the munitions our president spoke about.
Before.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, on munitions, you posted overnight that the U.S. has a massive amount, and
That's right.
you denied that there were any shortages. There is a supplemental request for $21 billion
Sure.
to restock. So why is that request still there if there's
Well,
no
because we
urgency?
need more all the time. I mean, we need more. Look, we gave tremendous amount to Ukraine. The Biden people did. And they were given free of charge. No charge. No charge. Billions.
And that shows you how our country was taken advantage of before tariffs, which the Supreme Court made our president give back. But the simple fact is they've been basically banking off of our market because we control the mass market and we are the market when it comes to worldwide, the nation, right? Our country has the most massive market in the world. And all these countries, as big as they try to be, and being our adversaries and our competitors like China, but they have to sell our things here so their country can thrive. But the simple fact is, they're selling their things here, but we couldn't sell USA products over there to China. And they just be getting away scot-free, just importing and exporting for free off the backs of us USA consumers, right? So you would think they would get taxed a price for at least bringing it back to our economy, while they continue to make boatloads of money to take back to prop up themselves and their economy.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. And fortunately, I built up so much during my term. I rebuilt the military and also loaded it up with a lot of stuff. We have certain types of munitions that are very powerful, that we have virtual unlimited supply. We have others where it's a little bit tighter, and we're getting them in on a daily basis. As you know, our defense companies are building more plants right now than at any point in history. They're building plants for the Patriots, for the Tomahawks, for everything. But we have certain types of munitions, which are they may not be as accurate. They may not be, they're not as elite. We have elite too, but we're watching that very closely. But we have certain types which are very powerful and very good, and we have an unlimited supply, and so we're in great shape. But with that being said, we always want more. We have to have more. We have other things maybe come up. Maybe come up and maybe don't come up. Hopefully nothing else does come up.
And that's the beauty. Keeps them on their toes. You never, if you read, you got to read through the lines with our president. We're straight, but you never want to let your enemy know if you're straight or not. right? Leave them guessing. That's the best way to do. Surprise them if you need to show you if they force your hand. Remember, don't poke the bear too much because then when it bites back, who is to blame? You, the enemy in this case, which I mean by you. But let's talk about some of these specific claims they're making, right? They're saying the US has depleted 80 to 90% of its THAAD interceptors. They're saying we have exhausted our Patriotic PAC-3 interceptors, our ATA-CMS, our Tomahawks. They're saying Iran can fire ballistic missiles at will and we can't stop them. And they're saying we abandoned military bases in the Middle East. And if you only read the headlines of many of those I've shown you, for the mainstream liberal media. And if you only caught the news alerts, you'll think we were moments away from total collapse. But let's use some common sense here, family. Every war depletes munitions. That's how war works. You fire missiles, you run low on missiles, you build more missiles. That's not a scandal. That's logistics. The question isn't whether we use weapons. The question is whether we use them effectively and whether we have a plan to restock. And according to what the administration has actually said publicly, they do have a plan. I mean, he's a businessman. Come on now. You gotta have backup plan after backup plan after backup plan. I give you an example, as I'm taking this on in regards of cybersecurity, right? Of course, you have to have a backup generator in case the systems go down, so then you can restore it and be where you at, like you weren't affected at all, right? And not only after that, not only do you have to have a backup generator, but also you have to have things stored in the cloud, which you have a cloud engineer who makes sure things are basically looked at one big picture when it comes to emails and it comes to the hacker activity or whatever the case may be in regards of the threat and seeing where that threat is and how active the enemy was when it was in that territory, being in that environment until when they left or if they're still present, right? And then you can see the logs, right? The activity all the way down to the location of where this hacker or the threat was at, and all the way down to the simple fact of email, you got phishing links or whatever that simply made it all the way down to the root cause of how that hacker got in or got into that territory to basically affect the whole system, right? And then you have scenarios, right? Where then you familiarize yourself with the playbook to prevent that happening again. And then also you have a list of tactics as you get better within your security operations center to see how effective you're getting and how effective your security operation is or your systems to make sure they stay up to date. As hackers, they don't ever get tired, right? They're always finding a way. But then if you have phishing links or fake links that can lead to threats and hackers getting in, you have that on the list to know, okay, I'm not going to deal with those links because those links are public in a list of other links who have been highly known to be a threat. But getting back to my point, because that's what businesses do in corporate America, just using cybersecurity as an example, and tech and logistics wise and everything else, right? Restocking and munitions. So they requested billions to restock. They got production lines ramping up. They're building new factories, but the part of that story doesn't fit the narrative, so it gets left out. Not like we didn't help NATO out multiple times. Our allies better be backing us up. As money we put in there. But let's talk about this claim that the U.S. can't protect the homeland. Think about that statement for a second. The United States military, the most powerful fighting force in history of the world, has bases in over 80 countries, has aircraft carriers in every ocean, has nuclear submarines that can strike anywhere on the planet within minutes. And we're supposed to believe that because some interceptors are low, we're defenseless? That's not reporting. That's propaganda designed to make you scared so your demand changes you don't actually understand. And the military has layers upon layers of capability. And the people who are making these claims, the anonymous sources, they know that. They're using scary language because scary language gets headlines. And headlines put pressure on administration. And this isn't about national security. It's about bureaucratic warfare. And I want to address something that's been bothering me about why the media is framing this. They're reporting these leaks as if they're heroic, right? As if the people leaking classified information are patriots who are saving the country from a reckless administration. But imagine for a second that the roles were reversed. Imagine these same generals were leaking against a Democratic president. Imagine they were telling the world that a Democratic administration had depleted our munitions and couldn't defend the country. Do you think the media would be calling them heroes? I'm just asking a question. Because it seems like rules for thee, but not for me when it comes to parties, right? Which is why political violence is so high. Republicans are evil for preserving, keeping our country strong and having to being a strong sovereign nation and upholding our traditional values and Western culture and making sure that we uphold what our founding fathers set in place and draining the swamp of corruption and upholding the separation of powers and actually upholding democracy, and which the Democratic Party has basically projected and lied in a deceitful way, acting like they were for upholding democracy when really they were using democracy for their own benefit to pad their pockets. And which is why you see the DNC, basically putting up their headquarters for sale in exchange for bucks. You see, not only did their autopsy report have a chapter erased, and you can go check out that video I put at the end of this video, but they had a chapter erased for their autopsy report. So they don't want to get better because they have so much money in their own little bubbles. They didn't care, and they don't care to relate and actually make sure that they're on the ground understanding the working class and everyday Americans, because they have basically banked on us and used the sentiment of emotional language to tug on our heartstrings and say, oh, working class people and affordable health care, all in the name of schemes and plots and corruption and fraud. Where they got so much money, they don't care, and paying their consultants six-figure salaries and things like that. And now you have the head of the DNC, who was the strategist, basically ducking on the table somewhere, hiding and playing find and go seek, and they can't find him. Because he said they would be transparent and showing where the DNC went wrong, and he would never suppress or hide any information like that. But actually, the Democratic base pressed him to release it, just to come to find out that the things they were wrong on is erased from the autopsy report entirely. And the individual consultant who did the autopsy report admitted that they gave the chairman of the DNC the information. They just choose to ignore it. So the standard change is basically based on entirely on who's ox and who's being gored. And that's why more and more Americans are tuning out the mainstream media entirely, because they see the double standard, they see the coordination, they see the agenda, and they're tired of being treated like they're too stupid to notice. Let me give you a specific example of how the media twists things. One of the stories that came out said Trump and Hegseth are building these big new battleships that the president likes the look of, the Trump class battleships, and are using that as evidence that the administration is making frivolous decisions that don't make military sense. Now, let's think about that. The military has been spending trillions of dollars on programs that never deliver, on weapon systems that don't work, on consultants and contractors who get rich while the troops get equipment that's decades old. And the media wants to pretend that the problem is the president wanted to build a battleship that looks different than what the generals wanted. The real scandal isn't what Trump or President Trump is building. The real scandal is what the Pentagon has been buying for 30 years without anybody asking hard questions. If Hegseth is actually looking at the procurement process and actually asking whether we're getting our money's worth, that's not a scandal. That's the job. But the media doesn't want you thinking about the trillions wasted on failed programs. They want you laughing at the idea of big battleship because that's easier to mock. Right. And here's the bigger conversation, and where the bigger conversation comes in. This fight over Pete Hegseth isn't really about Pete Hegseth. It's about whether the Trump administration is going to be allowed to actually change the way Washington works. The Pentagon is one of the biggest bureaucracies in the world. It has more people, more money, and more institutional inertia than almost any organization on the planet. And when you try to turn a ship that big, the people who like the old direction fight back because it benefited them. Not to mention that we have the Democratic Socialists of America, in which the Democratic Party has socialists basically taken over. There's no moderate or no middle ground Democrat anymore because they far left base don't agree with that, and they oppose that. And no moderate middle ground elective, no moderate middle ground Democrat will be elected. That's why they hate John Fetterman so much, right? They want a far left socialist in the name of communism. To the simple fact, you already seen the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America agenda. They want to abolish the Senate. They want to get rid of prisons. They want to get rid of our military. They want to get rid of the presidency and only keep the Senate. Everything goes through there. So what I'm saying is they leak, they complain, they run to the press, they call their friends on Capitol Hill. They use every tool they built over decades to protect their turf, right? To use the old direction to fight back. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. These generals have relationship with reporters that go back 20 years. They've cultivated sources on every major news desk. They know exactly which stories to plan and which angles will get traction. And the media, which is institutionally opposed to Trump, Trump derangement syndrome, which we'll see in a minute with Rosie O'Donnell. I might as well put it on the screen because this is just an example. Right? And the mainstream media attacked it. Oh, Trump is dumb and foolery and his foolings. He's on here mocking Rosie O'Donnell. But she has Trump derangement syndrome. All she do is bash and talk about our president. Right? Which is the most anti-American thing to do. You may not agree with the president, but like I said, respect the processes in the name of democracy as much as these Democrats, pro-Democrat individuals are like Rosie O'Donnell. But she's the one that benefited off of the perks of this country. But then just because you disapprove of the president, your hatred is so big that you're even disrespecting our country entirely, let alone the role of the presidency. So get your behind on. And the reason why she lived in another country, but it can't be that good, right? But Rosie O'Donnell is an example, as a lot of Americans would say, as the far left. Extreme, don't have no logic, common sense, don't care to preserve and actually keep traditional values what made our country great in the United States of America. So she's a Looney Tune, right? So when you look at that, just like the mainstream liberal media, a lot of Americans would say, as I read comments and things like that. So the media institutionally opposed to Trump, and you see Rosie O'Donnell go on the media and be opposed to Trump with Trump derangement syndrome. And everyone he appoints, he's happy to amplify, is happy to amplify every single complaint, right? With this Trump derangement syndrome. It's a perfect marriage of convenience. And the generals got to protect their legacies. The media gets to hurt Trump, and American people get fed a story that sounds scary but falls apart in 5 minutes of honest thought. And let's be clear about the timing of all this. These leaks are happening while Trump is actively negotiating with Iran. While we are trying to project strength at the negotiating table and be diplomatic with terrorists who are a bunch of Looney Tunes. Sick in the head, screaming chant to a death to America. And they call our president a dictator. And what do these generals do? They go to the press and they tell the world that we're out of weapons, that we can't defend ourselves, that our military is hollow. Think about that for a second. They're actively undermining their own commander in chief during sensitive negotiations. If that ain't the most anti-American thing, you should be sent out this country. Yes, our country is not perfect. Yes, our country has flaws. Yes, our country has sins. But look how far we came. But having the faith is so ignorant to stay in a house and live in a house with someone that you definitely despise. But at the end of the day, you're biting the hand that feeds you. In this case, the perks and being on the beauty of the United States of America when so many people die to come here. And Rosie O'Donnell, if it's so bad, then just don't ever come here. Just be gone and never come back. They're handing Iran and China and Russia intelligence on a silver platter. They're telling our enemies exactly where our weaknesses are, and the media is calling them patriots. No, that's not patriotism. That's sabotage. Whether you like Hegseth or not, whether you support Trump or not, you should be able to see that military officials leaking classified readiness information to undermine their own government during active negotiations is a problem. That's not whistleblowing. That's a coordinated attack to destabilize your own chain of command because you didn't get your way. And from my perspective, this is a clear example of why we need fundamental reform in how the senior military ranks operate. When someone has been in a position for 30 plus years, they stop seeing themselves as servants of the country. They start seeing themselves as owners of the institution. They build fifth domes, they protect our people, and they punish those who challenge them. And they forget that their job is to take orders from civilian leadership, not to dictate policy through press leaks. The Constitution puts the president as commander-in-chief. The Secretary of Defense, serves as at his pleasure. That chain of command exists for a reason. It exists so that the military answers to the people through their elected leaders, not the other way around. And when generals start running to reporters to undermine their civilian leadership, they cross the line that should never have been crossed. That's not dissent. That's insubordination. And it should be treated as such. I mean, I don't want to be fair for a second because that's what we do here. We look at both sides. Let's acknowledge what the other side would say. They'll tell you that firing generals in the middle of a war is dangerous, that it creates instability, that it sends a signal to our enemies that we're in chaos. And look, I hear the argument. I understand the concern, but here's the problem with that logic. If a general is failing in the middle of war, you replace them faster, not slower. If your quarterback is throwing interceptions in the Super Bowl, do you leave him in because it's the big game? No, you make the change. You put someone in who can execute. The argument that you can't make personnel changes during a conflict is how bad leaders keep their jobs forever. It's a shield, not a principle. And it's the same shield these generals have been hiding behind for decades. And we've been at war in the Middle East for over 20 years. And what do we do? What do we have to show for? Thousands of casualties, trillions of dollars spent in a military that's less ready today than it was when we started? The people running that show don't deserve protection. They deserve replacement. And this is where, when you look at it, right, the Pentagon has never passed a full audit. Never. They can't tell you where trillions of dollars have gone. They can't account for their own spending. And the people who are now leaking to the press are the same people who oversaw that system, and are the same people who couldn't pass an audit. And are the same people who signed off on programs that went billions over budget and decades behind schedule. And now they want to act like the problem is the guy who's trying to clean up their mess? That's rich. That's like the arsonist complaining about the fire department making too much noise. So I wanted to show you something because liberals are saying, oh, Trump is over here mocking individuals and being a fool, how foolish he is and dumb he is, right? Because you see Camp David. So individuals are mad because this is basically John F. Kennedy and Trump, right? And they're like, oh, President Trump posted himself at Camp David with President John F. Kennedy. This is what he's doing. This is what he cares about. Making a mock, blah, 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 being a fool. You might not think it at first, but Donald Trump actually agrees with a lot of John F. Kennedy's biggest ideas, especially when it comes to the economy. Both of them firmly believe that cutting taxes is the best way to get business investing and growing the country. Opportunity that they want to take away. Democratic Party wants to make successful people villains for working hard, which was the American dream where you can build yourself up and pull yourself by your bootstraps and make something out of nothing. And not only do the wealthiest pay the most in taxes, they pay the highest taxes in the country, the most taxes. When you get them tax cuts, obviously they want to avoid taxation. So they're going to spend to justify a write off, which then you can incentivize them to create more opportunity to actually flow and create a great economy where they can get paid more and stop having individuals depending on handouts where they don't have to, especially able bodied individuals. Nothing wrong with help. Everybody need help. Life is full of ups and downs. But if you have opportunities for them to thrive, to come back stronger than when they fell off or were down, you always have a booming economy, and you'll actually have the cost of living go down because individuals are investing in themselves. And ownership is the true wealth. Just like the American dream, the beautiful thing was family, which keeps us healthy. Two-parent background, traditional homes, and owning a home. Look how far we going now in the name of inflation and the cost of living going up from years of these administrations worrying about themselves and giving free handouts and patting the pockets of health insurance companies and car insurance companies and taxation. And now to the simple fact of giving handouts where individuals feel entitled in the name of socialism, which really is communism, to suppress individuals and make everything government ran and control, anti-capitalism, so they can control you to stay in power. Right? But also getting to my point, they also share a huge American first mindset when it comes to John F. Kennedy and Donald Trump on protecting local industries, keeping jobs at home. And we just talk about that with the munitions, right? And making missiles here at home in factories and plants, as our president said. The mindset focused on protecting industries, keeping jobs at home, but also not relying much on foreign nations that we just talked about. On top of that, both men obviously are political outsiders in their own way who love to challenge traditional Washington establishment and build up a strong sense of national pride, a strong country. They believe the best way for the country to be successful basically is to put American workers and American strength above everything else, right? True thriving in American success and American dream, I believe. And then I'll give you the last one because I believe that this is worth a productive conversation. I know this video is long, but if you got this far in the video, give this video a big thumbs up if you're getting some value. Um, George Washington and you see Abraham Lincoln, right? George Washington being one of the founding fathers, right? In which the Democratic Socialists of America want to get rid of the separation of powers. because in our human nature, we are flawed to be greedy. But if you have separation of powers, you have checks and balances where one overrides the other to check the other, because we know if you give a human too much power just by human nature, they will get an appetite that will never be satisfied, which leads to easier temptation of corruption. But anyway, when you look at Donald Trump's vision, because I mentioned tradition and separation of powers and preserving a country in which we're finding off in American culture for George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, right? When you look at our president Donald Trump's views of history, he connects his ideas to George Washington, Abraham, because they're basically ultimate symbols of American strength too, right? When you look at it, it points back to them to support his own policies, agreeing with Washington's focus on national independence, which, like I mentioned, with the example of tariffs, and Lincoln's fight to preserve the country, not for it to be undermined with ideologies, right? No borders and illegals coming in and getting rid of prisons, basically creating chaos and undermining and uprooting our country right up under us to overtake it, and now we no longer exist or have a principle or foundation in which we were standing on before, to basically upend and uproot and erase American culture and the roots of the United States of America. So when you look at it, right, praising our legacy, they all put America first, protecting borders and building economic power. Trump isn't just showing respect for the past, but he's using these legendary figures to validate his own leadership style. Doesn't sound like a dictator to me, and proves that his goals match the original vision of America's greatest presidents. So let me leave you with something from scripture, right? I know I rambled a lot. In the books of Psalms, right, chapter 33, verses 10 and 11, it says, "The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations." I love that passage for what we're talking about today, because it reminds us that no matter how well the generals coordinate, no matter how many media outlets they line up, no matter how many anonymous sources they deploy, their plans don't determine the outcome. God frustrates the plans of the peoples. He brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. What they meant for harm, he can use for good. The more they leak, the more they reveal their own corruption. The more they attack, the more they prove they needed to be held accountable. Their own strategy is exposing their failures. And that's not politics, that's providence. God doesn't need a perfect leader to accomplish his purposes. He just needs a willing one. And Hegseth, whatever you think of his style, is willing to do what it needs to be done. The generals are making their plans, but the Lord frustrates the plans of the nations. And I believe he's frustrating their plans right now. And for those of whom who are in spiritual, my non-spiritual family, here's the life wisdom. In any organization, the people who benefit from the current system will always fight to protect it. They will use every tool at their disposal, and they will call it in favors. Affordable health care, right? As they like to say, working class families. Sounds very sentimental. They will coordinate with allies and they will leak information. Hillary Clinton, oh, we should work with China to win the election. Hillary Clinton said that. We should work with China to basically win the election over Trump. Or with Obama sending cash to enrich the uranium to terrorists over there in Iran, chanting death to America. Right? So when you look at this, right, Obama actually supporting and backing a democratic socialist like Zoran Mudami, who supports the Sharia law. But they will try to destroy, I should say, the people who threaten their position. But here's what they don't understand. Reform only looks like chaos to the people who benefited from the old order. What looks like a crisis to them looks like progress to everyone who's been watching the system fail for years. So don't let the noise fool you. Don't let the headlines scare you. Ask yourself one simple question: who benefits when things stay the same? And who benefits when things change? The answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about whose side you should be on. I'm not telling you what to think or how to think, because the people fighting to keep things the same are rarely the ones who have your best interests at heart. So here's my question for you, family. After everything we broke down, do you trust the generals who've been running the military for the last 2 decades, or do you trust our president, Trump, and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, to clean house and rebuild? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button, share the video with somebody who needs to hear this side of the story, because the progressive political commentators, uh, Midas Touch, and all these individuals, they are going to give you the clips and not its full context to what's is in favor of their narrative, like the mainstream liberal media as well, in these reports and anonymous leakers. So, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on your post notifications so you never miss an upload. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. And let the love supersede the hate, family. Peace.